Hey everybody, welcome to a very special presentation brought to you by the Raising Awareness Group, Media Group. And my name is Kmt, and we're going to have a very special treat for you today. On the panel, to my right is Africanus, who is a host of our blog talk show. I'll introduce our special guest speaker here in a minute. Myself, Kmt, Kufu, who is also the co-founder of the group, Raising Awareness Group. And we have a very special friend of our very special guest, Mayaku. And we're happy to have him join us today. And as we talk about this great man, and they actually had a chance to have him sit down and spend some time with us, he has many accomplishments in his history. But through schooling, he has a BS from Florida State University, Master of Arts degree from Howard University, PhD from Howard University, and I would say that will be in demographic statistics and urban studies. He has various accomplishments in the community work with various organizations, too many to list. He held professorships and taught at Wayne State University, Lewis College, and Central Michigan University. One of the main reasons why we're here today is because this gentleman, along with other great people, his wife that we haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, PhD Tdka Kilimanjaro, a very good friend of ours for the Raising Awareness Group, Seba Yara Aneb, and Elder Tikamba Heru. And we want to wish them well in what they're doing. This project that brought us all together, that this great man has put together with his group of people from the University of Kmt Press, actually was a project of 15 books. Very, very good. A lot of hard work, 15 books. And the final drive took 2 years of hard work. And this man has really just come up to breathe for the first time in all this time. And we're very glad to get him fresh out of all this hard work that he's did. And with that, we want to welcome our friend, Dr. Tdka Kilimanjaro.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Before we get into the questions and everything, one of the things that we as a Raising Awareness Group, and the gentlemen, they can weigh in as they please. One of the things that we, for me personally, that drew me to you was this great line that you use all the time. Tell our children.
Tell our children.
And it's just amazing to me because, and I think you was also drawn to us.
Yes.
Because we had put together our homeschool supplement. No way in the world can we compare that with all this great work that you did, but the underlying theme is all the same. Our children are one of our most precious resources. And that tell our children, that line that you use, it has been a buzzword in the social community, the social media community, and people who know what that means, what that really means. Resonates volumes. It just means so much. Just those three words. Tell our children says everything. Another thing that you said, and us in the Raising Awareness Group, Africanus, Kufu, and a couple of guys that you haven't met yet, is if people show you who they are, believe them, okay? Now, that also speaks volumes, you know what I mean? That also speaks volumes. And we've learned that in this so-called social media world that we live in nowadays, this electronic world that we live in, a lot of keyboard warriors, a lot of people just like to do a lot of talking, not doing any work. So basically, your philosophy is our philosophy. You're not doing the work. Doesn't really matter what you're saying on the keyboards.
Yes.
So with that, I want to open up the floor to Africanus and have him ask you some questions, hold a conversation with you, and then we'll chime in as we go along. But before we do, do you want to add anything before we get started?
I just want to say, can I have permission to speak?
Of course.
Thank you, too. Elder Mku. I appreciate you more than you know. This is my first interview ever.
Oh, appreciate that.
Stayed out of the light
Good.
and worked. And I appreciate you taking these young men under your wings and moving forward. And I appreciate the fact that you all are willing to work, because that's what it comes down to. And thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem. No doubt. Have done.
Oh, that's no problem. Just thank you for, taking the time out to talk to us today. Basically, just to start off the first question, based on the many years of your research and compiling all your impressive library, which is right here, your library right here from the University of Kmt Press, what would be the formula for a successful community-based organization? Like if you see, just like us, we're a community-based organization. If they were, whether they were Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, wherever, anywhere in the United States, we have brothers in the West Coast, Texas, there's a lot of other groups, but if there was somebody out there that says, hey, you know what, I'm tired of being lazy, I want to do something in my community, I want to teach the children, what kind of formula for success would you offer them to get them started, to start their program in their organization?
That's an excellent question. I think the first thing that has to happen is you have to form a team. And I don't mean a group of people coming together at their leisure. I mean a team. When you see sport teams, they're there for the duration of the season. And then they prepare for the next season, and they prepare for the next season. And each person on that team has a role, and they take that role seriously. And if they don't carry their work out, the whole team loses. And so the first thing is to have a team. And once you get a team together, you have to have an organizing philosophy, which we had. We organized around Maat, and we wrote a book about it. You got to have guiding principles within that organizing philosophy on how you're going to operate. What's your chain of command? And you have to have a chain of command because teams carry out their activity based on what the task at hand is, and the organization of the structure allows you to efficiently carry it out. So you got to have a chain of command. Once the moral system is in place, you've got to have organizing principles for work.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people talk,
Right.
and they can come to town over and over again and talk, and they haven't built anything. Nothing built. And they're talking, and they're getting paid to talk. So talking has to be out, and work has to be in. So you organize around work. What's the task? If you're trying to set up a program for publishing information, you've got to really study what the process of publishing information is. If you're trying to set up a program for video information, you've got to set up yourself to be able to understand how that works too. And so a team does it. And once you establish that team, you begin to put in place the procedures or the protocols on how that thing is going to operate. And as we did with Maat, Guiding Principles of Moral Living, we put first work, and we put second after work, integrity. Because that's measurable. It's measurable. You can measure integrity. Whether a person keeps their word, whether a person carried out the task they said they would carry out, whether a person respect you. When we sat down, even though we're not that different in age, I'm about 8 years younger than you, you're still my elder. And our philosophies in Africa are foundational to respecting people who have gone further than we've gone.
That's true.
And as you get older in life, you appreciate that you have fewer years ahead than you have behind you. So that principle of respect is at the foundation of anything that we do. I could go into detail on how to do it, but we laid it out in Survival Organization, the step-by-step procedures to set an organization up that wins. And I told you earlier that the first thing you have to do is form a team. You have to have people who are willing to submit to that team's goal, whatever the goal is. And mine is always victory with whatever we're doing. It's winning. And if I score 1 point or 0, as long as I've helped the team win, I'm on the level with Michael Jordan. We won. We have our title.
No doubt, no doubt, no doubt.
You know, and again, like we're all just students and studiers, and I see one of your books right here, the study team. Something we looked at. Just and just in retrospect of the name of this book. What would be the importance of bringing together a study team in correlation to this book, to this title book?
Well, it's the first stage. Aside from having the morality in place, the organization, the team in place, you have to be able to study the environment you're in order to be able to improve it, or at least to know where it's at. It may not need improvement, but you have to be able to carefully study what's going on in your own community, and instead of waiting for someone to come from out of town who doesn't know anything about specifically what's going on in your community. They come in with a canned summary of what they've seen all around, but it may not be what's happening in your community. So you have to form study teams to be able to precisely identify something that needs to be researched, get the group of people, keep the team small. Don't get a large team. It's like having 50 students in a class with one teacher. It's much better to have 10 students in that class, or 15 at best. Same thing with a study team. Keep it small, because then you can identify who's doing what and who's not. But when you got 20 people who have assignments, it becomes an assignment just to keep up with them. But when you have 3 or 5 like we did, 5, 3, those are the numbers, just like in the military. Keep small teams. You begin to put yourself in a position to be able to do the research necessary to solve your problems. Because once you state a problem, the opposite of it is the solution. I mean, most people lose sight of that. You have to carefully state the problem, and then the opposite of that problem becomes the solution. So if you precisely state it, you can certainly begin to see what the solution is.
No doubt. And of course, like with us, the Raising Awareness Group, our elder, basically there is no, I don't go off and make my own decisions. There's a chain of command, and that's why I think our organization, and as you speak of, why I think we're a success, because as you said, we have lesser days in front of us than behind us. So, we appreciate the elder. He's been through a lot. He knows well more than both of us, and we appreciate the jewels that he gives us, and just the overall leadership that he brings to us as a group, and just following in the footsteps. And again, we're just all students and studiers. But when we're talking about your books and the lengthy time that you put into these books, chronologically speaking, how long did your team at the Kemet University take to complete each book? I mean, we just got 12, 15 books sitting right here. What would you say was the time that it took you to complete these books, chronologically speaking?
Well, that's a good question too, because we had to do it differently. When I brought up the comment that we had fewer years ahead than we had behind, you have to recognize that either you were going to do 1 book a year and then rest for a few months, or just line them up.
You took a rest? You took a break?
Well, we did the opposite.
You actually took some time to take a break?
No, I did. Well, we moved to an area. That's why we moved to North Carolina. We moved to an area where things are slow. You can not worry about traffic. And you made a decision that all the journals that you kept, hundreds of them over the years, that you were going to divide them up and organize them around a topic area. And then you were going to line up that topic area with a plan. And then once you had planned which book you were going to write, you're going to line all of them up and say, okay, well, we got 2 years. It's going to take 2 months to write this from these journals, and then it's going to take another month to get them entered into press for printing. And so one person has to take that task, even though 3 or 4 people have brought the journals together. They've written them and summed up the books over the years. And sometimes, as I told you earlier, 5 or 6, maybe 10 people have helped with Maat, helped to bring that together. So we made a decision. I'm not gonna, when you hit 50 years old, you don't look to say I may get 80.
Right.
So I didn't have 30 years to do books. We had to make a decision. So we made a decision to line up our journals, classify them, begin the process of summarizing them. I was given the assignment this time. The library was right down the street. It's like a job, 10 to 6. I went 10 to 6.
That's work.
10 to 6.
That's work.
For 2.5 years.
That's work.
10 to 6.
Wow.
I had because it's a small town,
Yeah.
I had a little room they gave me, just like this, and I went in there and closed it off, and I got to work. I turned over the drafts to the other people to read them, to correct them as best they could, and then we moved back to the process of line by line, making certain that what we said, that's what we wanted to say. So it took 2.5 years to do 6,000 pages of printed material and produce 15 books. If we had done it the other way, it would have meant we would have taken 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Because we would have had to do one book for that year and rest, and then start on the next one the next year and rest, and then start on the next one. We lined them up right when we finished the next one, went to the next one. And sometimes things overlapped, like teaching teams and study groups and SIBA, which is Research Handbook. There are things in there we could pull from each one of them to move forward.
Wow.
So we had to make a decision based on where we were at in life. You know, all of us have raised children. We have raised families. We've done the best we could. But when we got older, when you hit your 50s, she's like, oh, how are we going to get this closed out? My wife and I looked at each other and said, okay, you're going to work 2 years. I'm going to work 2 years. I'm going to do this work for 2 years. You're going to do this work for 2 years. And then you'll do this work for 2 more years. And that kind of way. We did it that way.
Truthfully.
My question to you would be, what book is your most gratifying work today?
M. Cool would know that right off the top. Even though Bach was the most difficult in the last one, Maat is the most important.
Yes.
Because it was for our children. I was telling you all earlier that that we started Maat, even though it's a 20-year process. My wife used to be a principal in a school, K-12, and we were dealing with issues with our children who didn't have the foundations, the fundamentals of right and wrong. We weren't talking about religion, we were talking about morality, which is right and wrong. And I was a president of a community college for a while, for 7 years. And I saw it with the children being, the young people being hardened in their rottenness, hardened in talking to you any kind of way, hardened in believing that they can disrespect you or disrespect someone. And you just gotta find a way to make a decision that you would put in place principles for them to work with before they got to that age, to 20, 25, 30, where it's kind of hard to do something with them unless they have integrity. And so Ife and I and others who were working, Elder and Yar and 5 or 6 other people who didn't want their names exposed, we began to write about these principles from our different angles, Kemet being the foundation. Obviously, we saw many of the principles drawn outside of Africa having come from Africa. Just people, put them in their own language. And we began the process of bringing all that material together. So yes, MCOO.
Yeah,
Maat
we
was
had
the
talked
top
about that, yeah.
by far.
For sure.
By far.
I think you kind of answered my next question, but my next question would be, which book can children gain the most benefit from, and what book can families read together and benefit from?
Well, there would be 2 of them. African Time is literally a foundational book. It's over 1,014 pages. We revised it since a year and a half ago when we first published it. At the time, they weren't handling 1,000-page books. They were still at the 900 level, so we couldn't even put the material in. We just held it out. But the reason we say that's important in line with Maat is because parents have to be able to teach their own children. You can't expect white people and Arabs who have taken advantage of us, enslaved us, imposed these religions, rotten stuff on us, to teach our children anything that's going to help them. And so, yeah, they have to take those exams. We told our children, all our children went to African-centered schools, but we saw after they got from K to 12, they still had to go in these universities and colleges that were not African-centered. And so you literally have to have the system of ideals in place that takes them all the way to a PhD program, and that's what we did with African Time. So parents would have that, children would get a chance to get that read to them. They would have a structure of ideas when they're dealing with people who would try to tell them that they're not worth anything, which is the standard procedure. So I would argue that Maat and African Time would be central in that regard.
Great. My next question would be, what are the key formulas of successful research?
Well, there are steps, and then there are, the formula starts with humility. Most people would not recognize that. They think it starts with being intelligent. It doesn't. It starts with being humble. You know, the first thing in Kemet's teaching, in African Kemet's teaching, was you first had to start with a student who would listen, who would put aside his or her ego, and then begin the process of learning from the teacher. And that's the problem today. You know, most people start off talking and don't respect the fact that you learn more from listening than speaking. Actually, that's why I told you earlier, this is my first interview, and I took it to heart, that you learn more from listening than you do from talking. So after that, you begin the process of studying what has worked in the world as a research process. Number one, you got to be able to state problems clearly. You got to have a literature to review, specifically to the area that you're studying, literature review. Thirdly, you got to have some theoretical framework. Ours is Kemet-based, but it's African-centered, centered in Africa, and the material that goes with that. And then once you move from the theoretical framework, you're dealing with the methods you use, which is the mind of the study. It's the brain center. You know, what methods did you use? You're not using one method. There are hundreds of methods, methodologies, but dozens of methods. And you have to master those. You have to be able to master which method to use in a certain situation. Like you want to study your community. Well, you might have to draw a sample. You can't get to everybody. So that method you're going to use, well, what type of sample are you going to use? Is it going to be a random sample, or is it going to be a sample where you literally decide on who's going to be in the sample, a quota sample? You have to make those decisions. Once you move past the methods of how you're going to carry the study out, you then set up a system of data collection. How are you going to collect your information? You know, who's going to collect it? Who's going to protect it? You know, I'm just a protector of this information after it had been collected and summed up. I was the person who summed it up, but they did the work. And you have to respect the fact that other folk did that work. You can't just, I've seen people do research and then put their name on it and make it look like nobody else did anything. And you see their name on it, just like, okay, well, you had 20 people helping you. Why aren't they mentioned? Or why aren't they on the cover? Some of them did more work than you did. And so we got that problem in our community. Once you get past collecting information and protecting it, you move to the level of discussing how are you going to analyze it. You know, will it be quantitative? Will it be qualitative? Will it be a mixture of the two? We want to stay away from speculative research, and I've seen a lot of that in our community. You asked me earlier, people are speculating and going off as experts, and you're just like, okay, where's the evidence?
Exactly.
Where is it?
Exactly.
And how did you analyze it? I mean, how did you synthesize it after you analyzed it?
Did it pass the test?
Did it pass the test? Right. The evidence test. It ain't even the sniff test, but where's the evidence? I'm waiting for it.
Right.
And once you have done the analysis and the synthesis, you then move to findings. What are your findings? What are your conclusions? We talk about findings. What do we find? When someone is talking about the development of this country, you have to go through it first and study it before you can have findings. And we have, about 100 pages of findings of what's happened in this country's history. Once you've established findings, you move to, well, how am I going to report this?
Right.
Am I going to write it, which you should, because you can then speak from what you wrote. And then once you say, okay, I've written it, am I going to present it verbally? Well, you've written it, so all you got to do is sum up that and sit in front of people with your notes. And then whether I'm going to put it on video. What's the format of media for me to present this? And then how can I calibrate it to fit the population that I'm speaking to? And so once you've done that, then the next stage is to ask for help correcting things that you made mistakes in or that you left out, which we did. We first published this at 836 pages. We asked people to send us notes on what we needed to improve that they thought they wanted to see. It's now 1,014 pages. So you gotta be open for correction, admitting errors. And because what we started off with, because you are humble, it's not a problem for someone to correct you.
Not a problem.
You want them to correct you.
Right.
You want them to correct
There you go.
You want them to say you made a mistake there because it helps you to improve the document.
Exactly.
And so, the humility was the first thing I said. You gotta have it.
Awesome. My next question is, how does an organization target the demographic or segment of the community in order to successfully complete its mission?
It depends on what you're looking for. Me and the brother earlier were talking about back to Africa, and we were saying that we could go as individuals at any time. We get up $3,000 and $6,000 or $7,000 to live for a year and find our way there and leave. But that's not the goal. The goal is to set a foundation in place, as Garvey did, for all of us to be able to have a home to go to when we choose. So the topic area is most important, first of all, to identify the people that you're gonna have to work with for that topic area. Say in substance that your topic area is housing in Africa for millions of people. You need architects, you need construction engineers, you need people in that area of work. That might be a committee task. Say it's food security, meaning how are we gonna eat when we get there? You're gonna identify people who are in that movement and then bring them together. So if it's about 80 people in the movement, you don't want all of them, you want the best quality that you can get who have morality and integrity. So you might end up with 4 or 5 people. But that committee would be working on that project. Say for instance, you're working on the actual trip, transportation from one place to another to get to places. However you came in the direction, that's the way you're going back.
Right.
You came on ships, you came through the Caribbean islands and in those regions, that's how you're heading back. So you begin the process of setting up base areas in these places. You came from the west, then from the east. So you've got to find your way back through those routes. It's not magical, but I say all that to say that whatever the demographic is, it's tied directly to the problem statement. That's why I say it's so important. Whatever you're identifying, you begin to identify what goes with it. And so if education is the key, scientific education, you begin to look for persons who are in that area who are with us, who are doing the work that we can work with, who don't look down on people because they ain't got a degree in front of their name. You see, that's one of our problems too. People begin to make up degrees. They make them up. And you don't have to. If you're doing the work, degree don't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
I was just saying, trying to interrupt. I can't help it. I got to interject. That and you brought it home to me was that a person's work speaks for itself, not the certificate, not the title, not the degree. The person's work brings the integrity, and the honesty brings the integrity. I heard you loud and clear when you told me that.
I had to say it because it's most important that you appreciate that. We don't need degrees, we need integrity, we need workers. Because in the final analysis, everything that I know, I could teach someone. You don't need a degree to learn that from me. You get it, you got what I have, and then you push it forward. But people go out lying about stuff, thinking that the lie ends up giving them the ability to do it. Say, for instance, you're trying to fly a plane. You get on there and put a pilot suit on. You go and get on the plane.
Pretty pilot suit also.
Yeah.
Nice wings.
You got nice wings on your chest.
Yeah, wings on your chest, little captain's cap, a little captain's hat. You go sit up in the front seat and you turn the plane on. Oh, well, you may not even know how to turn it on.
White switch. Or switch right there.
Yeah, still don't know.
I don't want to touch
And
it.
that's what's happening in our community. You know this.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And all they have to do is humble themselves to the reality that we're not looking for degrees. We're looking for people who will work. Because you can teach them if they have humility and integrity, you can teach them anything that you know. They can learn it if they're willing. So yeah, I would say that at the foundation, it hits home to me that we've got to find our way back to what Kemet taught first, which was this integrity, Maat, this balance, this justice, this rightness. We got to have that first. And we get that, we won't have all of this mess going on where people can come and talk for 30 years and nothing gets built. You're just sitting around looking, okay, they've been talking for 30 years. Where's the stuff that they were going to build? Didn't get built.
Didn't get built.
You mind if I follow up on a issue that you brought up? One of the, first of all, I want to thank you very much for your work. Having been reading African Center Scholarship for the last 20-something years, one of the challenges I had was to figure out which books to introduce, how to introduce them. The various different books and schools of thought have challenges with them and pluses and minuses. One of the things that I think that your books have done has been to a review of all of that scholarship and a summing up of the very best of it and locating it in one location.
Very well put.
So I look at these books as libraries almost. I look at them as libraries, given all of the sourcing that's available and just the broad breadth. So I want to thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
One of the questions that I had that you mentioned about, kind of going back to Africa and that being one of the major objectives, is there any ideas or plans to put together a manual or a series of manuals so that people can understand how to get from Detroit to Zimbabwe?
Well, that's an excellent question, because that's why I'm meeting up with all of you all this first year that I'm getting out, because we have to actually get ideas from everyone who's doing work. We may not see Africa as far as our time, but the children have to. The 20s, 30s, they have to, because the foundations for our existence here is being pulled from under us. So yes, I would argue that where we're at is the transition from University of Kmt Press to University of Kemet, which is an online university that we're doing. That's the transition that I'm moving to. Someone else is moving to the press, and they're going to be working on the books that have to be done the next couple of years. But my task is to begin the process of getting in place an online university that connects us. So ideas like the ones that you're presenting can be brought together, because we don't know much of it. I shouldn't say everything. We don't know much of anything as regarding the details of these moves, but us together, we can come up with these answers. Because I have my own speculations on the subject. But you opened it, and we'll get to it. We're working on the online university as we speak.
Cool. And you know what, just to piggyback on that, you hear a lot of African American, even global African people in Europe, Asia, where have you, they want to get back. There is a substantial amount of people here in America that do want to get back. And a lot of people are visiting. They're visiting, but they're not moving back, but they're visiting.
Yes.
Kemet, Ghana is a hot spot.
Yes.
Nigeria, Lagos, you have a lot of people. But in your opinion, what country in Africa, in the continent, do you believe is more suited for African Americans to move and stay permanently?
That's an excellent question also. Actually, you all putting together some good ones. That's a great question, and I could actually list some names. And What I will say is the criteria has to be ease of language, 1, ease of culture, 2, ease of environment, 3, and then needs on both sides. Ease of language is important because you can't move to an area that the French colonized and you're speaking English, and you can't move to an area that the Arabs are dominating and you got to learn Arabic. And if you're speaking English, you've got to move to an area that speaks English, and then you transition into your dominant languages that are there. That's what you got to do. Say, for instance, I was trying to get to Zimbabwe, which speaks English. I do need to learn Shona too, because 87 to 90% of the population speaks it. And then you've got to learn actually some of the dialects that go along with it. But the point I'm trying to make is there's a criteria to get started. And language is at the foundation, because it's the communication foundation. Now what I would do after I brought up Zimbabwe, I would begin to look at the areas that are longing for assistance in the areas of education and technology. I would look for those areas because whether we know it or not, the most technologically advanced aspect of the black population in the world is in the United States. People don't understand that. The most educated population of blacks is in the United States, technically educated. Most people don't understand that. The most college graduates, the most technically prepared, the population that has moved up the ranks in a highly technological society is blacks here. They're not elsewhere. We don't have places in Brazil. They don't even let us in these universities. In Colombia, where we have these large black populations, they don't even let us have jobs in the legislature. You can go look it up. And so, as bad as things are here, we fought very hard for education, and we won in many of these areas. And so I would argue that you have to have a criteria first, and then deal with the naming of the country next. Stay away from anything that has to do with battles between religions. You know, where the whites got the Christianity on one side and the Arabs got that Islam stuff on the other. You'll see that in African countries that cross the equator on the north side. You'll see it. You can split them. Nigeria is one. You'll see it. But you have to look in there because you'll end up on one side of that. You see. And you don't want to be on either side. You're on either, if you're not on either side, both of them are attacking you. So you have to think about criteria more so than the name of the place. And once you've got the criteria established in the process of the ease of operation with the population that's there. I brought up Zimbabwe because Mugabe is there. Take that land back from those whites, take it back. And that's the first basis for anything is land. You gotta have the land first, and he's done that.
Okay. You know, I was sitting here thinking about a lot of the stuff that you said, and we covered a lot of ground already in your own, particular way. You know, how you got all that stuff in there like that, we did. And Brother Maat, thank you for joining us on the panel. It's been very, very great work, meeting you.
Thank you.
And it's amazing how you just meet people, as you just, and hopefully we'll have a lasting relationship after this. You're good people, man. I appreciate that. But, as I was sitting here thinking about some of the things you said, I was relating it to not only our organization, raising awareness of what we're trying to do with our supplement. And I want to let everybody know who's listening and looking at the interview that our supplement is not a homeschool program. It's just a tool for parents to get their children off on the right foot, in the right direction. So when you do find a suitable place for them to go for homeschooling or some kind of a charter school, you can do that. But by no means do we want you to sit back and not do anything with your children. You know what I mean? They cannot be exposed to a European cultural mindset without some kind of check and balance system.
Yes.
And you give them a cultural educational supplement, that's where the counterbalance comes in, okay? Now, having said all that, we need a blueprint, which we think we have, but more importantly, because you are into the methodologies and things of that nature, how do we as an organization, and I'm going to speak for all organizations, but more specifically us, how do we poll the effectiveness of a tool that we want to put out there? Now, I know we're going to have people help us with distribution. We talked to other organizations to help us distribute it around the country, and we're getting ready to do that right now pretty soon. Help us with that. How do we poll the effectiveness of that kind of a supplement?
Well, you would probably survey, that's number one. And they have a program, not a program, but it's on the web. It's called Survey Monkey. It's not that expensive at all. Survey Monkey is the one I use.
Okay.
And by the way, I like your supplement, I told you that. I appreciate you all beginning the process, and I wouldn't even call it a supplement at this point. I would say you all are doing the work that's necessary to lay foundations. I would call it foundation.
We appreciate that.
And so you would actually online survey. You don't really want to hand out paper stuff no more.
Okay.
You want to get people on the computer, send them to the library. This stuff is free mostly. And on their phone, they can do the survey right on their phone. SurveyMonkey has the phone app, and they can go to it. The issue then becomes, what questions do you ask?
There you go.
The first question that I usually get as a foundation, once you get past the demography questions, who the person is,
Right.
and where they're coming from, what's their resource base, how much they earn, you get to ease of use. Ease of use. Was this useful to you? And you begin to break that down into elements. And I would argue that once you begin the process of breaking it down into elements of the question, you make the decision whether or not you're going to have some open-ended questions, or are you going to have these multiple choice type answers. And I would argue that for people who ease of use operations, you would probably want to use the multiple choice type things.
Okay.
It's called a Likert scale.
Okay.
Likert scale. You want to use a Likert scale. I can show you how to put those things together.
Okay.
The point I'm trying to make is, once you've gotten past asking them how easy was it to use, what did you like about it, what did you not like about it, what could be done better, then you get to the point of asking them, can you work on this? Help us work on this. And what role would you have in it? That's when you begin to bring people around something, because you're already lining up tasks. See, people talk, but when you give assignments and you got 10 people with an assignment and 3 of them do it, you keep the 3 who did it.
There you go.
And you discuss with the other 7 why they didn't do it, but you really focus on those 3 who did it. And I can tell you, in a room of 50 people, if 10 come up there and get to work, that's the 10 that you building the base with. And if you go from one side of town, let's split it in 4 pieces, east, west, north, south, you get 10 from each side of town, and you gridded it, establish the grid, you begin the process then of taking that 40 and building from it, because you can then extract out of that 40, maybe 10 or 15, that are going to be your core members. And that's what we've done. We've gone everywhere we've gone to get work. Many of the members we have now, people who are helping us, we've extracted the ones who did the work, not the talk. I mean, everybody wants to talk. But once you hand that document out and begin to see who returns the questionnaires and get on SurveyMonkey, you'll know who they are. You begin the process of seeing who wants to work. Those are the ones then you will see results from that wants to work.
Okay. It would not do us any justice not to suck out as much information as we can from you.
Oh, you're gonna get it all. You're gonna get it all within the time you said.
You know what I mean?
My wife told me to tell you everything. That's what she told me,
Our organization, and as you know, a lot of people ask us how long have we been around, and some people think we've been around for a number of years, and we haven't. We've only been around for a year. A lot of it has to do with some of the principles that you have listed today. We got a very good core group of people, and we kept our numbers small intentionally.
Yes.
Didn't know whether that was the right thing to do. It just made common sense to us,
Yeah.
not knowing that we were doing it right.
Yes.
Sometimes you do things right by accident.
Yes.
But we I know at some point are going to need to fund our organization. We came up with various vehicles that we were thinking about. Give us some ideas of what vehicles we can use as a small organization to gain funding and get going like that.
Okay. That's a hard question to answer, but it's an easy question when you have good people. The first answer to that is dues. Persons in the organization, whether it's $5, $10, $20, whatever you're gonna pay for lunch or dinner a week, you could put it in that organization for the month. So, we pay our dues on the 3rd of each month. It's paid.
Okay.
You miss a month, you make it up the next month, but you miss 2 months, you get a note.
Miss a third, but you get a pay slip.
Well, that's what's written in the charter. We've had to cut a few people.
Oh, okay.
Because
Right.
it's important, even if you're not employed, you don't have resources coming in, you have something coming in, so you better pay $1. That's what you pay. You might have been paying 100, but you're down to $1. You can pay that. We got to get good at that, which means that we give what we have. Whatever standard we've set, we know what happens when we don't have resources coming in. It goes down to the lowest standard possible. Number 2, the material that you produce, you should be able to, we call it sustainers. You should be able to sell that, or at least get some resources from the material that, whatever it is. It's video, books, pamphlets, website,
Right.
whatever it is, you're gonna get something out of that. And so we call that sustainers. And it comes in in a sustained way because you're producing what you live off of, eating from your environment. Number 3, which is most important, is to have a periodical that you're putting out that people can pay for. Our periodical at this point are our books. And we were fortunate and able to get them done in a time frame that allows us to sustain ourselves from them. Number 4 would be organizations like you making donations. So you should ask University of Kemet for a donation each year. Even if you set it for twice a year, meaning I like to do that. Instead of waiting for the whole year, have it 2 times a year so it splits it in half. So people giving you $100, they don't see that as a lot when you're giving you 50. 50 and this is what we fight to do. And the last and most important one, and I say this, with an appreciation for you all, is that there are good people in our communities who want to help us. We call them financial angels. And we've gotten some help from some people who have quietly, helped us. They're financial angels. They're black people who will help you. And you ask. And you see me, I'm a person that'll ask, we need this done. We had help from a young man in Britain. I told him we needed someone to pay for the editing of these books, some of the books. And he said, well, which one do you need the editing done in? It was African time. And he gave us $1,000. I didn't even know him.
Wow.
Nor did you even set a denomination for it.
I didn't even ask for $1,000. I asked him for help. I said, this is what would help us. I'm gotta pay someone to help
Wow.
edit the book.
Awesome.
It's too much work. So financial angels are real.
Yes.
I'm not saying everybody gave us anything. some people promised and you didn't get anything. But when you ask someone for help and the next day you see something, they tell you, okay, well, this is where it will come and you get it. So I'll end that and say this. I put on record that I got $1,000. People be hunting me down. But what I'm trying to say is, we've had a few people who've helped us. A young lady in the city here in the United States has helped us greatly. So financial angels. The final, I said the final, but this is another. There are grant openings for our groups within the organizations that are forming unions. And this is what we're trying to do right now, is form cooperatives between groups, just like you are in formation. We've been around for years, but we haven't been around as a press, but just for 2.5 years.
Okay.
We're now getting ready to move into a university online, and that's new. So you actually have to form unions with other groups and see if they can do tasks that you're doing that can help you get your stuff done without, and I call it bartering, without money being exchanged. See, most of us get caught up in the money part of this. Most of this was done by work. Even the art stuff is work. You know, where can I get this picture from? Who has it? And so, cooperative work between, we call them cooperative businesses, but cooperative work between groups is really the key. And I call it bartering because there's some things you have. I like your video stuff. And then there's some things that we have that we could help with. We might be able to help with the print aspect of your work. You might be able to help with the video aspect of ours. And we exchange that equally because we don't see our stuff as no more important than yours. You don't see yours as more important than ours. And I think actually most of our, I would put 30%, a third of our work comes from bartering. Where people decide, okay, I'm gonna do this part of it and I'm gonna get this out of it. Whites call it joint ventures.
Big word for something about
it's barter.
Wow.
So, if you don't mind, I want to take it back to the University of Kemet, that you talked about, the online university. And the question that I have about that is, what would be the initial focus of what you would be teaching? Obviously, the material of your books and the research you produce would be a part of it. But in addition to the historical and research methodology and the ideology that you put in the books, what other areas would you focus on? And I'd like to tell you why I'm asking that question. One of the things that I've noticed is that we have not had a lot of people with actually the skills, science and technology skills, to actually get things done, build things, develop things, involved in the movement. A lot of the times those people are caught up in corporate America or their own entrepreneurial pursuits. So the question being, how do we, with the University of Kemet, in addition to the historical and methodological areas of focus, would you also focus on areas of science, technology, and vocations?
Excellent question.
Like a syllabus sample maybe or something like that?
Well, yeah, I actually stumbled into the course system and fees. I was walking out the house with stuff and actually ended up with this in my hand. We have 2 degree tracks. We have an applied societal engineering, and applied science and engineering. The societal part is economics, political science, social, cultural, family, that vein, government, and then you have the actual infrastructure of building, which is the science and technology.
Things we need to build a nation.
Yes, you gotta have buildings, you gotta have roads, infrastructure, civil engineering, you gotta have architecture, you gotta have the minerals being mined in order to pay for these things, geography, anything that has to do with the science of building, you gotta have manufacturing, construction, mining, even the agriculture has now a manufacturing element to it because the machines are doing a lot of it. I would say that science is foundational, but morality was first. Because our problem is we ain't living right. I know I said that in the way I wanted to say it. We ain't living right. Many of us not taking care of families, you know, men sleeping around with men, running around, women running around with women, and they down low doing
The
it.
worst.
Yeah, the worst, down low. Not honest enough to say this is what I am, so a person can say, okay, well, go on, move on.
Right.
I ain't part of that. Don't have the integrity to do that. And so we have a situation where our families are torn up in every environment. Most of them were just torn up. Many of them, I should say many. So I would argue that the moral foundation has to be reestablished. And then those other two areas that we begin to discuss, the societal area, you know, what type of social system? I'll say this. I hear people talking about they are nationalists. I kind of smile. I say, well, what kind of nationalists? What kind of nation are you going to build? Are you going to build a capitalist nation like the white people? Well, you have to do what they did. What religion are you going to have? You're going to have the Arabs' religion, Islam? You're going to have Christianity, the Romans' religion? You're going to have Judaism? What are you going to have? What kind of cultural system are you going to have? Whose architecture are you going to use? What kind of government are you going to have as a basis? You talking about their democracy? Their democracy was the thing that enslaved you. We haven't thought these things out. And so people are running around saying they're nationalists. I say nationalists to do what? I want to build a nation, but I want to know what kind of nation I'm building. So yes, we would have those morality at the foundation, and then these next two tracks, societal engineering we call it, building a society, nation building they call it, and then science and technology in every area, meaning every industry, our children should be learning how to build. Whatever it is, we need to learn how to build a press from the ground up, which we had to learn. We need to learn how to build a university from the ground up. So you don't see us out talking about, give me some money so I can open the school. We first go and open the school, build the University of Kemet and the press, and then we put our material out. You never see us on Facebook, GoFundMe. You don't see us taking people's resources in that way. We build a thing first, and then people come. So yes, that's the same that's going to have to happen with the African movement. It's going to have to be people making a decision quietly, many of them, because they're working for the whites. Many of them are. I shouldn't say many, most are. 97%, according to Dr. Anderson, Claude Anderson, he said 97%. I think it's around 94 now, according to Bach. 94% of black folk work in some connection with white people, and they're in charge of our money. So some things you can't do out in the open. You have to go about your business, but you need to do it. And these books were done with us going about our business. We didn't care about what the whites thought. We don't care about what they think now. The Arabs, we don't care about what they think. We have to go on about our business and get our work done. And if you have to quietly do it, you do it. But whatever it takes to continue to do your work, this is 25 years of work that we didn't stop doing. It only took 2.5 years to write it because we had kept journals over a 25-year period. And journals are just like DNA. You can unearth it
Very well put.
and then start using it again. They're around there messing around with dinosaur DNA, and they're using it again, you know, putting it in stuff. And so a journal is just like that. If you keep a good one, you bring it to life in the period that you're in, it ends up looking like that.
Thank you very much for the answer. One thing I'd love to say about the University of Kemet, I'm very much looking forward to that. I think that's an opportunity for you, obviously, not only to teach here in this country, but to teach the African world.
Well, that's why we're doing it, and we're going to keep it cheap because if you keep things cheap and you increase volume, you get a lot of resources. You don't have to charge people $1,000 a semester. You can charge people $100 a semester if you got a lot of people. And in Africa, you're not going to be able to charge, on the internet, you're not going to be able to charge Africans $1,000 a piece because many of them don't even have $100 a piece a year. So the point I'm trying to make is you keep the price low and the volume high. And that's what we're doing even with this. We could have printed 3 books for Bach. I mean, 350 pages per book. and charge $30 a book, that's $90. We chose not to do that. We chose to put it in one place for half that price, $49. And that's how we made the decision. We didn't want to try to rob our people.
There you go.
So yeah, we can actually do this. We just have to make a decision for the people who are serious about their work that we're gonna do it and get to it. And you noticed that, and that's what I love about you, Coop, that you made a decision to do something and you got to it. That's why we've gone to each other.
Yeah.
You make a decision to do something and you get to it. And if people are gonna work, they're with you. If they're not gonna help you anyway.
That's true.
I noticed that. If they're not gonna help you anyway, you don't need to go around there.
That's true.
I don't go around houses where ain't nothing there for me. Yeah.
Earlier, and thank you, also well put. Earlier you mentioned, when I asked you about African Americans finding a permanent residence in the country,
Yes.
on the continent, and you basically said, language friendly.
Yes.
Now, as we talk about African languages is not, I don't know, any K through 12 school in America that even gives the slightest bit of one word of an African language. But just quickly, do you speak Methodologies? Do you speak it?
No, I can speak it. I can write.
You can write?
elements of it, yeah.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. As it's our classical language, do you agree?
Yes.
It's African classical
Yes,
language.
foundational.
Do you feel as though it is important, and all of us, we've all decided, we've all agreed and decided, is the reason we're in this group, to start to learn to read, write, and even going forth to speak it. But how do you feel about it as an importance for us and even our children to learn the African classical language? How do you feel? And also, does any of your books here, I'm pretty sure African Time does, but does any other books speak on Methodologies as a classical language and for children, just for the African Black people in America to learn how to read it, write it, speak it?
Well, we use about 50 to 70 pages of Methodologies and guiding principles of moral living in Maat. We use about 70 pages in there. We have an internal document that we decided not to publish publicly on Methodologies for a lot of reasons. One of them was that someone else was already doing it.
Right.
And we didn't want to,
Interfere with their work.
Yeah, since we were going to teach it internally anyway. I say all that to say that Methodologies has to be taught foundationally to our people. Now, when you go into different parts of Africa, you want to learn those on the ground languages first in order to be able to communicate with people. But that depends on where you go. But Methodologies you should take with you wherever you go. Dr. Ricchetti is doing the best work in that area.
Yes.
A young man by the name of Warjetti in the Amin Ra Squad, he's doing great work. He's younger, but she's a PhD in language.
Yes.
She's great.
He's a student of her.
Yeah, she's producing great students. It just shows what type of person she is. She has never gotten the credit she deserved. I mean, she's the best in the field, in my view. I mean, Beatty does some good work, but Dr. Ricchetti, Amin, is the best I have seen. And our elder, who's in charge of our Methodologies, Elder Haru, he learned under her. And so he's taught us, and we learned elements of what we know under Omar in Senegal. And so my wife learned, and she helped me. So I say all that to say that you got to learn that as a foundational language, and it should be taught to our children, even as the beginners. They should get it, because you then begin to speak to each other without the other people knowing what you're saying. It's a good thing to have that ability to talk to each other like they do you. Like, get up in there and start talking and you don't even know what you're saying. Well, we actually want to talk to each other in another way right now, and that's our foundational language.
That's good. As it constitutes the homeschooling, and just in general, schooling in general, that we've all dealt with, K through 12, and some of us collegiately, and after that. Me personally, just to let you know myself, I went through 12 years essentially of Catholic school my whole life.
Yes.
Did I appreciate it as I got older? Yes. While I was going, did I appreciate it? Absolutely not. But my high schooling was basically 4 year of an all-boys school,
Yes.
paired with the sister school essentially right next door.
Yes.
In your opinion, do you think, as just in concept, I'm talking about white children, but as for black children, do you think that separating boys in schools in a school setting would improve the learning of those individual children?
I would be speculative on that one. We had a school I was a board chair of an African Center K through 8 school for 10 years. We met what is called AYP, Annual Yearly Progress, for 10 straight years. And I left. I'll tell you what happened after that. Point of matter is, we made sure that took place. And this was a school with young ladies and young men in the same class. They both brought their own issues. As I told you earlier, when we were doing Maat, we were taking in consideration what they were bringing from their families and their upbringing in the neighborhood. So I would be speculating, because I have not seen the results of any data reflective of them being separated. I would say that when they were in classes together, it is what took place in that school and what was taking place in their family and in surrounding environments that was the dominant thing. If they're in a peer environment that is rotten to the core, you're not going to have many of them come out not having some of that on them. If they're in a family environment that's rotten to the core, you're not going to have many of them coming out not having that on them.
That's true.
And then when you get to the school, if the whites are up in there just tearing up stuff like they're doing in Detroit, and closing school, just tearing up, putting 60 students in a classroom and one teacher, just tearing it up, and then expecting you to learn something, you're still not going to get anything out of that. So I would argue that instead of focus being on the sex of the child and the behavioral patterns reflective of the child growing up, hormones coming on and all that other stuff, I think the actual context for learning in each of those environments I spoke to has to be standardized in a positive way. The peer group system has to be standardized, the family system has to be standardized, and the school itself has to be standardized in a positive way. If you don't have those three going on in a useful way, that kid is going to fall through the cracks on one of them, or two of them, or three of them. Just think if you got all three of them in a bad light, you're going to come up with some kids who just don't know it. And we've seen it with our own eyes. As I said before, I'm the person that got the college students from junior college students. For 7 years, I was the vice president. I saw what came through there. I was in charge of institutional research, so I saw their grades. I saw their psychological summaries about some of the things that they had gone through and the trouble they'd gotten into. And I saw what the end of the road was for them. And many of them had those difficulties because of those first 12 years. So I wouldn't place sex at the foundation of it, and I said I couldn't be speculative on it, so I wouldn't know how that turned out. But I do know what those three areas are doing to both our children, both sexes of our children.
Okay. Now also, just to piggyback on that question, and I'm going to the teaching aspect, what are your thoughts on non-black teachers? Meaning, I've had African American history taught to me from a white, male and female, and even an Asian during my time in schooling. What are your thoughts on non-blacks teaching African history or their brand of African history to us in their academia? What are your thoughts on that?
You all might not agree with me on this one, but I think the central problem is the content of the material being taught.
Not the actual teacher.
Well, the first thing is the content of the material being taught, meaning what are the books being used?
Yeah.
Which books are being used? And then from that, what is the curriculum demanding? Curriculum demanding, curriculum and curricula. What is it asking the kids to be reviewed on and tested on? What should they know at the end of a semester? And that's the key. Once you see what the state curriculum is, and then you see what the school has to do to match that curricula, then you have the books that go with that and other material. And when those books and the curricula material at the state level, because that's the key, are set up to say you're not worth anything, the kid has to regurgitate that in order to pass the test. And so whether a black teacher is teaching it or a white teacher is teaching it, you're still getting garbage in and the kid has to produce garbage out. Now, having said that, you want black folk in front of those children because those children would see that they could do that too. But the content of what's being taught is more important. I want black folk teaching African time. That's what I want. I want black people teaching their own history that they wrote instead of the whites writing it and the Arabs writing it, which is garbage. Just plain old lies. You can actually walk through the lies that they tell that these children have to pass a test with. What do we teach our children? We taught them, tell a white man what he said happened with George Washington and then tell him it's wrong if you write an essay. They can't check the first part wrong, you see. They can only get mad at you because you put the last sentence in there. But we have to at least put ourselves in a position where we know the lies that they're telling. It's a good thing, it's like inoculation. But the children have difficulties with that because they're having to learn twice as much as other students sitting beside them. So no, we've got to take charge of that from the curricular level. And so the moment you decide to set up your own schools, you ain't taking state money no more, so the hell with their curriculum. And then the next stage is to design your own, which is our next move from African K-12 schools. We're gonna have the curriculum we would use in the school. And then from the curriculum, you have to have the material that goes with it. Lesson plans are worthless if you don't have the books in place to teach from them.
That's right.
And you see these people walking around talking about lesson plans, so what are the books that you're using? And they're handing kids 50 and 60-year-old books. And these kids know better. They're looking at you just like, well, why am I sitting here with a 60-year-old book and those kids have new books?
Right.
Because we haven't done the work. And we need to start doing it. And so when I spoke to you about 15 books being done in 2.5 years, just think if 50 folk got themselves together, divided up into 30 groups, 150 people, divided up into 30 groups, and with 5 people in each group. We can have about 400 or 500 books done in a year, or 2 years, from each area. Somebody have a team of 5 people do chemistry. Somebody do martial arts. 5 people get together and do martial arts. 5 people get together and do the material from K through 12 for biology. 5 people get together and do the part for agriculture. 5 people get together and do the manufacturing part. Mathematics. 5 people get together and do those. And then they pass it around to the other groups and let the other groups see if it's useful as far as understanding. And then they begin to take the children through the process of learning it and say, okay, we can learn from this. Produce those books, print them, use the little resources they put together, get a short run. Just think, we will cover those curricular areas instead of handing children 40 and 50-year-old books, which the child looks at and says, look, man, that's old stuff. Where's the new stuff? So yes, we have to take charge of the whole process, just like we've done. We don't let these people tell us what to write. We don't let these people tell us what to print. We don't let them tell us how to print it. We don't let them tell us what to put on the cover. And we don't let them tell us what we're going to say. But when you have people, in charge of what you're going to write, I'll give you one example. Some of these, we have 2 or 3 books that are coming out that I won't be writing them, but Ife and others will be writing them. They were books that we would, when we were in the university system, thinking that, okay, we can hand these over to them to publish, like a statistics book, research methods and designs, like a philosophy book. We thought about it, and then it became clear that we saw what other people were doing about 10, 15 years ago, how the stuff got changed after it hit the editors. We said we could never let them publish anything that we produce.
Because the damaging effect that they would have.
They're gonna change
to
it.
the criteria.
They're gonna change it. They're gonna change it. Even if you have evidence, they're gonna change it. Because they're selling to a group, a population of people that has to keep that lie in place. You see these movies coming out right now about quote unquote Egypt, kings of Egypt, gods of Egypt.
Gods of Egypt.
You see they're selling that to white people.
Right.
And you got all the pictures to show that people were black almost all the time until they got invaded and taken over. But these whites are selling that garbage to other whites, and the whites are paying for it. And so they're gonna produce it that way. Same thing with books. That's why we don't let them touch anything that we have. That's why our schools should not be touched by them. I'm really not sad that more folk are opening up these home schools and all. I just want them to have the resource material in place to teach. Okay.
And in correlation to what you're talking about as far as teaching, what method of teaching do you think can be best employed to get an African child to be receptive to a Pan-African body of information?
That's a very good question too. That's one that we're still working on. Obviously, we've done work with, as I said, K through 12 students, and then also first year and second year college students, and I obviously taught at the university level for about 15 years. I taught PhD and master's students, research methods and statistics. That's what I taught. That was my job. Looking at how I was able to get things through to our children, our young people, we are more visual in many respects from what I've seen than most persons. I don't say that's a negative. That's a positive thing when you can translate something visual into more than someone else who has to have words to do it. You see, Microsoft copies these icons. These are pictures. And you get in your mind what to do from the icon. They moved that from words and zeros and ones, the data process when they moved to Windows. So it's a good thing. Kemet drew pictures, and a lot of those pictures, they said a lot in the order of which they were presented. And so I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it as something that we did quite well early on, and people are just figuring it out. So I would argue that we have to do more visual things with our video, more video. We have to produce the books at foundational so they can go and actually get the whole process laid out. But I think the visual work that we have to begin to do more of, we gotta do it. We are a people that benefits greatly from it, and I think the world is beginning the process of moving in that direction now. Look at Apple technology. You know, everyone is moving into a visual direction right now. You push a button, you pull your phone up, and you got pictures, and immediately in your mind you begin the process of thinking that picture means more than just, you know, a whole page of words. So yeah, I would argue that's number one. Number two, I think we got to be more respectful of young people as adults. I've seen so many people shouting down children when a discussion would be easier, you know, and would be more useful. Meaning, why are you doing it that way? This is the way it's done to get the results that you're trying to get. If you're not trying to get those results, you shouldn't be in here. We can move you on. But if you're trying to get results that we have, let me help you. We got to be more of support. And I say this as an older adult, seeing some of the things that I attempted that did not work with my own children. It got easier. We had all girls. We took care of one, and we had three others that we took one off the street, and we had three others that were our own. But the best way to go about it is to explain things to young people and help them in that regard. And I think that a lot has not been done in that way. We've been rushing on that one. These last few decades, a lot of rushing has taken place, and when you should just take your time and explain things.
Okay.
Thank you, very well put. You know, one thing I have noticed in our travels, we do constant travels, in museums. We do footwork.
Yes.
Museums, lectures, what have you, debates, and one thing that we see is the recurring issues that we actually see more than just a handful of whites, non-blacks at these venues that we attend, especially in the museums, and people who have tours.
Yes.
We were at one of Renoco's tours, and
Yes.
there were whites there giving their own tour of ancient
Yeah.
Kemet,
Yeah.
and giving their version of the story.
Yes.
And it's kind of, conducive to what we were telling, what we are about is that we want to motivate and stimulate our people to get interested. Let's
Yes.
get them interested in learning our version of our history and hearing it from a black point of view. And like you said, even in schools where the context of information may not be completely accurate or well put together, at least it's been a black face. I'd rather a black face teaching it than a non-white. And that's something I just wanted to say to you, that we see that quite often that goes on.
Yes.
And actually, sometimes when we see on these tours in the museums, when someone like yourself is there giving a lecture or a tour, you'll start seeing the whites actually leaving their tour and come over there because they're like, wait a minute, this guy just sounds a little bit more correct than you do. But, and with that, just speaking on that, one thing you did say that was in one of your sayings, in one of your writings, you said blacks have been forced to use our oppressor's guide for success.
Yeah.
You stated that, correct?
Yeah, I do.
What, now, as we talked earlier, you agreed that the parents should be teaching the children.
Yes.
Now, what avenue should these parents be using to keep these children from falling into that grasp of the oppressor's guide to success?
Good. That's an excellent question also, because it's a question that starts with time. You've got to get them early, and they've got to respect you. So it has nothing to do with the education, but you've got to gain their respect early on. If a person doesn't respect you, no matter what you say, they're not going to listen to it. That's a problem when you're telling them something that they can use and they don't respect it. So I think the foundation is to gain respect through offering reciprocity and respect, and not let people run over you, but certainly the respect part is key. Once you've established respect and rapport with someone, it becomes a question of how do you present the information so they can understand it, best. We took years on a couple of these larger books to prepare for them because we wanted to explain them better. I mean, we could have gone at this years ago when we were younger and greener, but we wouldn't have been able to have the wisdom that comes with age, to be able to slow something down and explain it to someone. My best teachers were people who were able to slow something down, and they were not foreign to telling me that I'm going to explain this to you like I'm talking to the third grader. And these are PhDs telling me that. And I'm appreciating it because I can actually see how it fits together. So I'll argue in closing that I think what gets lost in all of this is we've got to establish rapport with our children again. Now they have to be respectful, that we will not tolerate disrespect from anybody when we're not being disrespectful. Now this is not being soft with children or with anyone. If I'm not being disrespectful to anyone, they're not going to disrespect me. That should be the bottom line. But once you establish that rapport, it becomes a question of what do they need, not what do you need. It's what do they need to understand this. My PhD's in statistics. Math is not easy because they've made it hard. It's nothing but symbols attached to formulas. And the symbols are Greek. Just think if they were Kemetic and you were brought up in the Kemetic language. It would be easy for you. But it's Greece. Law is difficult. Why? Because law is tied directly to Rome. Roman language. Any type of material that you go over has a Roman, Latin word for it in law. So they purposely sent you through their culture and made it hard. So science is hard because it's a mixture of Greek and Roman. They don't allow Kemet up in there or nothing. They make it look like they created stuff when they were 2,000 to 3,000 years behind. Greece is not even operational when Kemet's pyramids are over 2,000 years old, 2,500 years old. They built this geometrically with mathematics in place in an architectural system that dealt with rectangles, pyramidal structures, and geometrical circular systems for the pylons that we're standing in. And the whites had not even figured out, how to put clothes on their back good. But they're in charge of it now. So when they're sending us through these processes, it's difficult. So we have to slow down, teach the children slowly, and say what I just said about that's their language. That's why it's a little bit more difficult for you. But the respect is the first thing.
Okay. You know what? We're gonna be wrapping this up in a few more minutes, and we're getting a little short on time. But it's been an excellent conversation so far. We covered so much material. You can't help but think. We're on the tune of our children. We're on a mission to, and it's been the theme of this conversation pretty much for the last hour or so. Our children, a lot of times, and we've heard Baba Kmt talk about this before. We heard Umar Johnson talk about this, about our children being diagnosed certain ways in the schools. And a lot of what contributes to the fact that our children are diagnosed with this ADD and all these other things is because the material is an abstract form of science. The things that they learn in school is European, it's abstract. The symbolism that you talked about earlier, that is meta nature. Our African brain is for whatever reason, and I guess this is speculation, but it's pretty obvious that the African brain is designed to think and view things in a symbolic way. We learn much more. We learn much better through symbols. Children think and learn through symbols. And when you put a child in the school and you teach them in a way with there's a lot of symbols, a lot of visual cues and images and things that way, they seem to be more interested. But when you're sitting there and you're telling Johnny and Tariq and Shaniqua and then all these other kids that we just want you to just divide, just add, just multiply, just do some geography, geography or trigonometry, they're going to get bored with that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. What do you think? I guess I went all around that to say this. What is the difference in the psyche of the African child in a European center school? Why is it difficult for them to? I mean, we excel no matter. We tend to excel anyway, no matter where we put. But we seem to really excel when we have something that interests us. When we know that it's something that is. It's ours. When we know we're looking at something and reading something and learning about something that we know is ours, as opposed to looking at George Washington and Julius Caesar and all these kind of things. We don't really identify with that because for whatever reason we have in our heart we know that's not our history, that's not our culture. Yes. But when a child sees that, automatically they relate. It's more comfortable. Yes. You don't have this fidgetiness in the school, in the classroom. They're not jumping around. Explain that to me.
Well, you said a lot. You said a lot. I think we operate in both the symbol and the abstract. That would be my argument there. I think we operate in both. I know we do. Mm-hmm. But the noise that you brought up, I'm summing up what I see as noise, where the whites are just lying on every page, just lying. You go through a mathematics book and nobody did math but the Greeks. Nobody. And then Mesopotamia did some math. And you're just like, okay, where's the math that they did? And where are the structures that they built? You're sitting there with Kemet with thousands of structures that are still standing in Africa. And you have the actual pictures of the people being black for 3,000 to 4,000 years, that they colored themselves black. And yet the whites don't show those pictures, they show pictures they drew and made up. So a kid is sitting there sick. I know I was. I was sick in the 80s when I was in high school, late 70s, 80s. When I'm sitting there making a decision why I'm going into math and statistics and stuff like that instead of social studies and history. Because I didn't see in our books anything in American history but us being slaves or enslaved. So you got that noise. And then you got whites telling you you got to pass the test with that lie. Those lies. Or you're not going to get in college, or you're not going to graduate. So you got all of that noise, that pressure, that rotten noise, mixed in with the fact that they're using Greek symbols and Roman mess in order to describe phenomena that is universal, but only trying to say it was built by the Romans and the Greeks. They don't can see it. Well, the Chinese don't see it that way. The Japanese don't see it that way. They're seeing it through their own cultural lens. We have to see it through our own. And so if I had time to go in detail of why we did African time, I would say that we established and reestablished that foundational civilization on the planet was African Kemet in the Nile Valley. That was the most advanced one based on what they produced. And we have the evidence to show what they produced, and nothing else comes close. And that was black. And once you begin to put that at the front of every single science in our books, that the first biologists were black, that the first architects were not Greek, they were black. And you show them. You show what they built. The first people engaged in astronomy and astrology were black, who actually mapped the stars, elements of the star systems in place, who knew that there was a serious A and B, a planet, a solar system, not a solar system, but a galactic system with two suns, which one you could see at a certain time. So many 1,460 years you could see one of those suns very clearly because it's larger. We knew this stuff, that in chemistry, chem, we had already established. In anatomy, we had already done the medicine work. We knew where the heart was. We knew where the brain was. We knew what it did. We knew all these things, and yet and still at the front of each book, they got the white garbage, the white lies. They're actually discussing algebra as if Arabs, who were desert nomads, couldn't even read and write, are actually making up math formula. They're only invading countries, stealing what we call contraband, intellectual contraband, and translating it into Arabic. They're the last population to be civilized in that region. 650 AD, they're still majority desert nomads. Hadn't written a Quran, can't write. And yet and still, it's being presented as being the fathers and mothers of, the fathers of algebra. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm sitting here looking at Dr. Obinga's book, The African Philosophy, which shows you clearly that 3,000 years before the Greeks, the algebra systems of putting math in an equation so that you can receive an answer from it, stating it at A plus B equals this, or A minus B equals this time this, or divided by that. We were already doing that 3,000 years before Greece. So the children are looking at that in some ways with squinted eyes. And so they don't want to do it. I know I didn't. And so they actually push it aside. That's why we have to take complete charge of the information that goes into our children's heads. And that's gonna take time. But when I made that example about people forming teams, getting the best quality people in each area to form groups and then set up a system for producing the ideals on paper and then establishing that as a basis for a curriculum, brand new books, that's what we gotta do in order to solve that. Because you're absolutely right that it's sickening that children have to go through this just to get information in when they're sitting there sickened by the fact that their parents, and obviously even black folks, sitting up in there in order to get a job, get a paycheck, telling lies for the white man. Telling lies. And you get a PhD in telling lies. You stand up in front of these children telling lies. So don't think for one moment I was in the university telling any lies, because I wouldn't have been able to write these books if I was telling lies. These are my notes, many of my notes from lectures in the books. So if someone stood up and said, well, you wrong, which many of them did, well, here's the evidence. You show yours. They don't have any. You show me Mesopotamia, Sumeria, I say, well, show me the evidence of what they did. Show me the writing. You know, you can't go around talking about a story that someone told because the whites were making up a story to make it look like civilization started in Asia, West Asia, and they don't have the evidence of it. And yet in Kemet, all of it's there. You have the kings, you have the tombs, you have the bones, you have the buildings they're in, you have the structures still standing. All of them are stone. And then you look over this other place, it's none but mud.
Mud bricks.
And you're trying to date it, pulling up plants, talking about that plant is this age. Well, how does that plant have to do with the body? So no, they're lying. And we have obviously been able to, pull them up on it because we asked, well, where's the evidence? Where is it? Because we have ours. And so that's the reason I don't venture too far away from Africa. Because we have ours in Africa. We don't have to go elsewhere and look at their stories. Whenever someone presents a book to me with a story, I say, well, okay, where's the evidence? I don't need the book, I need the evidence. I don't need the story. Because we put the evidence right in there, take a picture of it, so you can see it, and we show how they dated it. Not pulling up plants.
In mud.
And mud bricks. Mud bricks.
We're going to try to wrap this up, and we're going to ask the panel, Brother Marquis, you want to do a last wrap-up question for our Brother Tdka?
Again, thank you so much to you and your beautiful wife and the whole team for producing this work. When I got Bach 2, is that correct?
Yes.
When I got Bach 2, I realized that was going to set me back about 3-4 months. That's the only issue I would take.
I'm sorry.
Every time
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
You introduced another library, so thank you very much for that. I guess the final question I would have would be, what are your plans for the next 3 months and the next year for 2016?
Well, I'm gonna need y'all's help with that, because I'm gonna get out on the road and do something I haven't done in 25 years, which is beat the pavements, preaching the gospel of the information that's being presented. And so I'm gonna need to have some, I won't call them lectures, but workshops set up around the book information that's in these books, because the information that's in these books, and also around organizing. My task at this point is to organize committees around study teams, around research, around actual survival institutions, meaning actually setting up institutions in our community that really we can fund ourselves with and we can eat with. Because the reason we did Bach is to show where things are headed, where they've been and where they're headed. And if white folk are making certain they have jobs and putting us out on the street, gentrifying everywhere we're at, destroying our families, we have to proactively set up institutions in the environments that we're in that allow us to survive and then prosper enough to transition out of this. You see, when someone encircles you, and I know you know this, sir, and they actually pin you in a corner, the issue is the corner you have been pinned in, because you actually have that behind you, keeping you from being able to move. And the whites are pinning us in an economic corner where so many of our people don't even have means to live right now. I just saw a report about not only are black men in prison, but black women being put out of houses and apartments. The highest eviction rates in the country are black women with children. And so they're out on the street. Because the job that would be at the core of them living is being taken from them. And so, I mean, they're forced into these 2 and 3 jobs for pennies. So I say all that to say we've got to institutionally take over these communities in a different way. So I'm gonna be out preaching the gospel. I will need persons to help me set up some places to be able to present the information, and whatever resources I can get out of that, I'll apply it right back into the University of Kemet online. Because once we get that structure set up, we can begin the process of bringing in all the groups that are teaching something and presenting video and all the other material, and actually have people pay $10 for it per month, the whole thing, everything that you get. And if you get 1 million people doing that, they ain't paying much. They pay the cable bill, and that's $150, $200.
They can pay $10.
They can pay $10 for education. So that's the direction it's headed, sir. Thank you.
Once again, my name is Kufu Aku Mentotep, and I'm co-founder of Raise Awareness Group, and I just wanted to graciously thank you for letting us be the people to conduct your first interview. And my last question to you is, as far as University of Kemet is concerned, I'm a big proponent of economics, and for the future of the University of Kemet, I would love to see y'all get with maybe some young business professionals, or maybe some people who are well known in the business community, and really start pushing the agenda of economics. Because in my opinion, us as a people, we need to reestablish economics in our community. Education is great, but our people are really lacking economics. And to me, that is the key proponent to overcoming the adversity that we're facing today, is economics, because people cannot get over, it's hard for somebody to, and no offense whatsoever, but it's hard for somebody to come to a Bach 2 or any of these books if they're having trouble feeding their family.
Yes.
And getting resources to which is essential to their everyday well-being. So this is why I always say, I like to see people pushing economics. So do you have any plans for the future of pushing economics more?
What we did, VOC that's what is the economic history of the United States, with black people being the foundation of it. And so we actually show you what ends up being a situation whereby we are being pushed out from manual labor. We were the foundation of this country in agriculture and manufacturing. And then mechanical labor, which is the factory system, the early factory system. The whites were in that. We were still in agriculture. Then we transitioned into the mechanical in the 60s. They were moving into semi-automation and automation. And right now, with their educational system, they are purposely keeping us out of that educational training, so we can't even be in the computer automated machine production element. We can't get in it because they kept us out of the schools. They got us in a situation where we're boxed up in these 60 students per class with a person standing over giving them garbage. So I say all that to say that we had to do that one in order to explain how we got to this point and what we had to do. I agree wholeheartedly with you, not as a standalone, that economics, we're saying it's a system. It's like a body has 9 primary systems. It's one of them, and it's key. And it's not a standalone, and it's not something we push to the back. It's at the front. We gotta eat. Gotta have clothes on our back. Gotta have the roof over our head, the rent paid while we're here. But the issue is what economics toward what? That's why I said nationalism toward what? Economics toward what? What is happening now is individuals are setting up these operations and they're doing it for profit. and then they keep the money. Their family lives good, they're rich, you know, they sit around, walking around with millions of dollars, and you don't have anything. And you're saying, okay, well, I helped these people get this operation going. What was in place for them to turn that resource over to the community? Nothing. So we actually have to redefine what the distribution level process is in economics, because there are 4 components to it, actually 5. There's a production element of everything in life. There's a distribution element. There is an exchange element still, you know, money, credit, cards, paper, barter, whatever. And then there is a consumption element where people consume what they published or they've purchased. And then there's a reproduction element, which is the 5th one. I say all that to say that the distribution element, I spoke to, is being co-opted for profit. And people are living good off of the community that they're in. And I could go in and start naming names, but the point I was making was that, yes, I agree wholeheartedly with you. It's just we've got to redefine what kind of economic system we're setting up, because we're setting up the same one the whites are setting up. We'll have a broke population with a few rich black folk, just like the whites have a rich population because they living off of us, with a few very rich white people. And we don't want that kind of system. So I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly.
I'll be more rapid.
Just wanted to basically just mention a couple of names, you know, John G. Jackson, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Carter G. Woodson, just a couple of names of some famous book writers in our community who've essentially just been banned from college curriculum. I only have known of Dr. Ashanti. I'm pretty sure you're aware of him. He's in and out of Temple every now and then. He teaches a private class at Temple University. I've attended 2 of his classes. He also gave lectures at Harambe Institute right in West Philly, Overbrook section, which is another basically African-centered school in the West Philadelphia area. It's not too many of you left. I mean, let's just be real. And it's good to still have brothers like you active, and you still have your good, solid mind. You're not like a boxer. You're not punch drunk. You're not punch drunk. You know, it does happen. You know, some of us have lost our mind a little bit, but it's still there. You're still sound, fundamentally sound, and that's one thing I noticed about you. You're very sharp. You're witted. You are very articulate, and you're still all there. But my main question, it's a simple question. With all this information right here, laid out in front of us, you're next. And are you ready to be boycotted? Are you ready to be banned from college academia? And basically, when if I'm in an African American or African history class at Penn University, and the professor says from the rip, do not bring up anything according to Tdka Kilimanjaro in this classroom, or you automatically fail. How would you feel if I was a student at Penn University and the African history teacher told me that, and I said, wait a minute, this guy is worldly wild known. He has a curriculum in its own. Why can't we talk about him? How would you take that? If I wrote you a letter and said, hey, dear Mr. Kilimanjaro, I'm a student at Penn University, and they basically told me you're not allowed. Your name or none of your works are allowed in the African American or the African curriculum here. How would you take that?
Well, it's already happened to me. And the good part about it was I ended up at a black community college that I took over the institutional research part, and they had 17 departments, and I wrote their reports every year, so it allowed me to learn how to write big books. You write 700 or 800 page reports to the accreditation agency. Each year you learn how to do this easily. You collect material from 17 different departments, summing up what they're doing. But I was literally banned from Wayne State, which is at that point the largest concentration of black people, because it's in Detroit, at a university, Research One university in the country. And I could go through the tenure battle. I'm glad in the final analysis I didn't end up wasting more time in that situation because even though we helped at least 20 people that were in there get their PhDs, and before I came in there, not one black person that got a PhD in over 25 years out of the department that was in. So it served its purpose. So I haven't been back into that setting, and I'm not going back into that setting ever. When you hit 55, you're at an age where you're either going to get it done or it's not going to get done. And you can't waste time with white folk. You can't waste time. And I didn't waste any. When I was in those environments, I isolated the black students, set up study groups. That's what the books are organized around. I moved from study groups to teaching teams. We're out in the community teaching with the books. We taught every summer, our kids, along with the kids in our community. We moved from study teams. SEBA is nothing but my first year and second year research methods class for undergraduates. We have Art of Research books coming out. It's a huge book Ife's dealing with. It'll be about that size. It's a book for PhD and master's students, research methods. And so we're using whatever we taught. We're just rewriting it so that people can understand at this point. So we don't want to waste time with white people. I really feel bad that black folk are still tied to that, so much so that they're scared to even work with us in quiet. Meaning in substance, they're scared to even, once they leave the job at 5, sit down for 2 or 3 hours and write the things with us that they can't write with the whites. Even if they were doing it with a pen name, they won't do it because they're scared of losing those jobs. So no, I know exactly what you're saying, Ivan, and I appreciate you saying it, but I don't accept any time to be wasted at my age. And I'm actually fighting now to get deeper into these communities and show them elements of them, how they're gonna, that's why What Is to Be Done was written. It's okay, well, what are we gonna do? Well, we need to get in these communities, set up the study teams on a very small level, divide the groups up, find out who's gonna take care of what, make sure they have a structure for funding themselves. We talked about the 5 areas of funding. And begin the process of weeding out the ones who ain't gonna work and keeping the ones who gonna work, giving assignments, check up on those assignments, complete those projects, move on to the next one, and then begin to see each other differently because we actually are productive people when we're working. We're not productive when we're just talking. So I'll end that and say, I feel bad for persons who actually have to stay in that in their mind, stay in that situation and not make the decisions required of them to begin to do our work. And I quietly went about my business, got the work done in those institutions that had to get done, mastered my craft while I was there, didn't waste time, and moved on. Didn't let the whites stop me at any point because I kept doing my work. When they were doing their mischief, which they are involved in, you still working. I mean, my summers were not spent vacationing with them. My summers were spent summing up 20 or 30 books in a journal. In that same journal that I would bring up and bring back to life 15 years later. Oh, this is what I was thinking. Okay, let me add this to it. So no, we have got to stop wasting time with white people trying to get credit, trying to get a button pinned on our chest, trying to get a medal pinned on our chest to say that we're professors or somebody smart. You're not smart. You're doing what they want you to do. And it's useless. You have never seen a black person in a university write a 1,048-page book. Why? Because the whites want you to be stupid looking, that all you can do is a small little project. And they say, okay, that's okay. They want you to look like a fool. They don't want you to stand in front of them and say, okay, well, where's your evidence? We have almost 2,000 references in the text of our book and footnotes, which shows exactly where we got the information from, which you could go right back to and pick the information up and see it. Where's yours? They hand you books with no references, just their opinions. So they want blacks to be stupid. And so I don't really have much respect for folk once they find out that the white man is giving you tenure to be stupid. I don't have much respect for that. I really don't. Because if you can't go through your own history and study something and come up with answers to your own problems, how can I feel bad about you? because you made a decision not to. You got that PhD, you got what goes with it, which is the skill you're supposed to be able to do something, and you haven't done it. I made a decision when I sat in those meetings. I have to say this, and this is a short thing. We were in the same meetings in college, undergrad and grad school, where everybody was talking about what they were going to do. We sitting up in those meetings when they were close to getting out of the PhD program, 8 or 9 people talking about, well, this is what we're going to do. Let's work together on this. Let's get this project together. I sat in those rooms with many of them from Zimbabwe and Brazil. Howard was, at the time, a university that took in blacks from everywhere to get higher degrees. And I sat in those rooms, and I saw everyone telling us what they were going to do. They were talking, and not one of them, can I say, did any of the stuff that they told us we were going to do. I kept working. So I would not feel bad about anything when a person knew what they should have done, and they just took the little medals that the white man pinned on the chest. Like they're in the military, you killed so many Vietnamese, I'm gonna give you 5 medals. You got the Purple Heart, you know, and that's what they're doing in academia right now. That's why we can't get much help. But the good thing about it is, you got you all, you got me, you got other people that are learning every day that it's more important to do our work for our own community than it is to do it for theirs. And I'm happy to say that's what we need to be.
And you can't be banned from your own university.
That's true.
You said it.
It's true. I'm just going to ask you to lay out what I thought was a very prolific explanation and description of how one goes, how will one conceptualize a project from start to development to finish. And you did that with the concept of building a train and a train.
Do you like that?
I love that. And for people who didn't see, for people who didn't read that,
Yeah.
I think that goes a long way, because you know how we how we have to teach. We have to teach in very direct and simple ways.
Yes.
You know, all this like again, it's abstract stuff.
Yes.
You know, A, B, C, D. Look, I think that description is. Can you just run that real quick and for the people who are going to be looking at this video?
I like that one too.
Yeah, let's have that.
I knew you would probably. You and I have the same. We were somewhere down the road we met centuries ago. That's an important analogy. A train, and especially the newer ones. A train has some fundamental aspects to it. A train system. The first thing that it has is a track, a series of tracks. It's on land, but someone has to clear the land. A group has to clear that land, clear the path. And the group that cleared the path for us, in my view, was Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner, and the group that came after him, Garvey, and obviously on up to Malcolm X, Paul Robeson, that core group that did their work. When I speak of Harriet Tubman, I smile because I was in parts of Maryland, I was in parts of South Carolina, areas that I thought that she had gone through to do some of her work, in Virginia, and but mainly Maryland and Delaware. And I saw how dark it was at night in those bushes, and I just thought of the courage it took to do what she did. And I said, you need people to clear tracks. You need people who are made of something, who may not have an ounce of college or high school or elementary school education, but they have this. And it's clearing tracks. That's knocking the trees down. That's plowing through stuff. We need people who do that. And that foundation has been laid. Dr. Ben,
Yes.
laid. John Henry Clark, Asa Hill. You start just going down the list of these people. And then once you have laid the tracks have to be going in a certain direction. That's what I meant. A chain of command. You have to know where you're going. You can't just lay tracks any kind of way. You got to have a plan of where those tracks are going to end up at. From point A to point B to point C all the way to Z. You got to be able to know what the plan was ahead of time. You don't just clear the land and then start putting tracks anywhere. You got to first of all have a plan, then plan how you're going to lay those tracks, then lay the tracks, and then you got to put a train on them. But you ain't putting the cars on it yet. You putting the train. Those are these organizations. That's your train. Within the train, there's an engine. The engine is very important. What's driving this thing? You and I know it's what we gotta do for these children. They gotta have a path. And that gets me up every morning. I smile every morning because I know I'm doing something that's right, that should be done. I'm not arguing with anybody. And I said, again, the hell with what the whites think. We don't care what they think. We getting up every morning doing what we gotta do. So that's my engine. But you gotta have a powerful engine that drives you through all kinds of conditions. And you've gotta make certain that that engine is well tuned. Now, having said that, you don't just have a train with an engine on the track. You gotta have some engineers. Your organizations that carry out the work that they say they're gonna do. And the operative term was work. Not talking, not showing up saying you're gonna have a school in 4 or 5 years. No, getting the school built and then seeking the assistance of people who see you building it. And so the engineer is really important because once they sit down, they gotta have a flight plan. They gotta have a place where this train is going, that they're operating, whose engine they have. This is even before they hook the cars to it. The cars are the population you're getting ready to go in the community and ask for help with. Because as we spoke earlier, you asked me about this, interviewing people and finding information from them, polling. Those people will end up being the boxcars. Because some of them are going to get on that train and some of them are not. Some are going to get on and get off quick. But some are going to help you by moving up and showing clearly that they want to work. So I said all that to say, once you get a system in place and that engineer has a plan, they also have a time of arrival. You know, brothers and sisters, a schedule. Yeah, brothers and sisters get caught in this one, don't recognize it. That's when I have people coming and speaking to them for 14, 15, 20 years, hadn't done anything. Because the plan didn't have a time of completion, or a destination and a time of arrival. And so once that plan is in hand, and the engineer has it, and he's operating or she's operating within the context of a system that they have set up with a train track, a train on it, with a powerful engine, there's nothing that stops that. It gets where it needs to go, people get where they need to go, and they saw how they got there. They actually can look out the window and see it. So you can see where we're going with this. If you really put them in order, you see, okay, we're missing 2 that are on the table, but, oh, that's where they're going. And why did they end with this one? Well, because it is the end. It's the one that starts you to make a decision what you gonna do. And so I say, I'm glad you brought that up because I smile about that one every time. Numerous people ask me how did you come up with that.
That was an awesome post.
I was riding a train one day. That's how I got it. I was on a train looking out the window and thinking, how are we getting where we're going? And I was thinking to myself, we can explain this. Your organization is important. Raising awareness is going to move to another stage, I'll tell you that. But it's very important to have an organization because that is the actual train, engine, and engineer. The box cars come after the fact. Remember, you can add as many on to that train as the engine will pull. Let's remember that. You also can disconnect them. So you see a train pulling, 30 box cars and it has a poor engine, it's going slow. You see? If it's a strong engine on it and these box cars have 150 or 200 box cars and the people are doing, the box cars are doing what they should be doing in connection to that train, so yes, I appreciate that. That's the one that I really want people to begin to work on because that's the one that gets the work done. It ends up in the destination.
Wow, it's been a really, really great experience.
Well, his microphone's pretty sensitive anyway, but, it's been a great experience, and you gave us so much information. Like you said, your wife, you did well. Your wife told you to give us everything.
She told me, because I told her I was nervous. I hadn't spoken in years.
Yeah.
Purposely not. I banned myself from talking. So many people running around talking mess. I ain't out there with them. And so we're going to do some workshops. But we're not going to be messed up. We're going to go over what needs to be done. Just like I explained that train, there's some things we got to explain. Yes, my wife, I hope she'll be happy. I'll let you tell her that
Okay,
I'm working.
okay.
I'll tell her that I
Well, we definitely plan on having, well, we talked about that. We definitely have a plan on having a conversation with Ife.
Yes.
We want to come down as a group and visit you over in your hometown and
We look forward to
and
it.
spend a day there with you. Also, Yara
Yes.
has ended up being a pretty good confidant.
He's a great man.
We've been talking quite a bit lately, and he's a fantastic guy. We want to get you and him and on our Blog Talk show with Ivan.
We'll do it.
You know, you want to do that. Your elder,
Haru, your elder Haru.
Tdka Haru.
Yes.
Yeah, and you also have another elder. Hey family, yeah, we're here in the last part of our interview. Had to get out of that stuffy room and everything. Got a little hungry, got a little warm. So we're down here. What's the name of the place? Peaches? Peaches. We're down here in Peaches over here. I think we're still in Silver Springs. Jamaican restaurant, Caribbean restaurant. We want to thank our friend, our good friend, Mr. Tdka Kilimanjaro, for joining us. And so as I close out, I want to read something that our friend did, okay? For the record, there is no confusion in the future. We set our own standards. That's why they are much higher than the norm everywhere in the world, black or white. We have 15 new books in 2 years. That's after almost 20 years of research though. Most are research methods and statistics based on procedural books. All are applied to human relations through the lens of history, social, economic, political, cultural, moral in the case of our educational in the case of African K-12, societal in the case of Art 2, etc. We have our own philosophy, theories, methods, techniques, and procedures for presenting our research findings, and we document them for all of us to see, which is often unheard of. The recently rewritten 1,014-page African Time is a history book, obviously. So too is the recently written 1,048-page Part 2, which focuses on the United States societal history and black folks in it, as opposed to just African history and African time. I wouldn't limit anything that we do more to mere sociological. Our approach is interdisciplinary and meta-research based, multiple research designs. We are African scientists first and foremost, studying various phenomena in different settings, using their history. As a medical doctor, he uses yours, or my case history, to diagnose a disease or an ailment, then treat it with what has worked in the past. History is central to everything. Without it, there is no progress because everything is built on the past. Tell our children, define yourself. Though some think they are doing you a favor, they may be in your own way diminishing you consciously or unconsciously, because standards are set so low by the ruling whites that you could go through life and never see a black person write a 1,048-page book. You have nothing to compare it to. So you in cognitive dissonance try to define it away by labeling it in a box as to diminish it. Tell our children, raise your standards, especially in our communities. Get to work. Stop settling. And with that, what we want to do is wish Dr. Tdka Kilimanjaro well wishes and much success in the publishing of his materials. His wife, Dr. Ife Kilimanjaro, Saba, Yara, Aneb, and the other elders who have worked with you in the publications. And thank you, my brother. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you also.
Anything you want to add to closing out?
We're kindred spirits. We met each other just recently, and I love what you're doing with these young people. I love the way you carry yourself. So I'm appreciative to have my only interview ever.
That's an honor.
You will not see us on tape anywhere.
That's an honor.
Done by you. So thank you again.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Mr. Ivan, go ahead.
I just it was an awesome time meeting you, and I think all our IQ levels were upgraded today.
Raised a couple hundred points.
And also just from you telling us, in the conversation and the questions and the Q&As, is that it's time for young adults and our mantra to continue the works and get active in the community. Get active. You know, don't get, you know, you just can't sit there and just talk to people. You have to actually do something. Get physical. Be visible. And, you know, even you decided, you finally decided to, you know, break your asylum, should I say.
Yes, I did.
And, you know, so it's only right that we continue it on. And you advised us on the side to take on what our elders do.
It's your time.
It's our time.
It's your time. That's what I said. It's your time. It is your time. We're going to help. We're supporters. But it's your time.
I get you.
It's your time. I see things are in good hands. That's what I see.
Man, I'm just privileged to be sitting at the table and to be able to soak up the years of wisdom that is just at this table as a collective. As I grow older and raise my daughter,
Yes.
and be able to sit down and show her your works and stuff like that, and to be able to tell her that, you know, I had the opportunity to speak with you on a personal basis, it's going to mean a lot. As I've said before on social media, you have picked up where our great scholars have left off, such as Dr. Ben, Diop, Chancellor Williams, John G. Jackson, the list goes on. These are very comprehensive works, and they're very good. So when I get to sit down with my child as she gets older and put these books in front of her, and she learns from me, I mean, it's just miraculous, you know, the things that I can teach her just from these works. So I appreciate the hard work that you put in. It's definitely a blessing to the community, and you don't know how much you greatly appreciate it.
Well, I do. I see it in your eyes. See it in your eyes. I appreciate you all. Happy to meet you all also.
Thank you, my brother. And Raising Awareness Group, we are out. Black African Power.
Yes.
Peace, Brother Tdka.
Yes. Hotel.
My topic that will be extended by Dr. Ben is a question. What will we tell our children about our fight for freedom? Extended again, what will we tell our children about our role in history? How we survived to this point? When people say we were slaves, what do we tell our children about our slavery in particular and slavery in general? What do we tell our children so they can stop turning their face away and want to crawl under the table when you mention our condition in the world? When will they stop blaming themselves? You have not explained it to them because you have not explained it to yourself. You have to know your oppressor and the nature of his oppression and what you did about it. At what point do we sit down and not argue about TV? At what time do we sit down and tell simple stories about our revolutionary heritage and get it across to our children? We have the longest revolutionary heritage of any people on the face of the earth. We have fought longer and harder and against great odds than any people on the face of the earth. Why do our children not know this? Because if they knew this and if they loved themselves, none of them would put poison in their veins. If they knew this, they would know that a code of conduct is expected of them, that they cannot afford to live selfishly. Their conduct must reflect the best in a whole people. And when someone tried to lead them in ways not of their liking, they should have enough sense of their own selves on this earth to say, we are not a people who engage in things of that nature. We are not a people who demean ourselves in that way. But for them to know this, they have to know what kind of society produced them. Coming out of a collective society, being forced into an individual society in order to survive. And this is an assumption. You think that you must take on the traits of your oppressor, when your role is not to take on the traits of your oppressor. Your role is to prepare to destroy your oppressor. His conduct in the world disgraces everything that can be called democracy, everything that can be called Christianity. It's even a disgrace to the thing that means the most to him, capitalism. He's misconducting himself in relationship to the one thing he used to try to hold on to the world, the apparatus of exploitation. Why can't we tell our children that whosoever God is, all people have the right and the responsibility to look at God through their own imagination and address God in a language of their own creation? Why then can't we calm ourselves down, then calm them down? What happened to the big kitchens where the family used to gather, sip some coffee, some lemonade, and began to discuss matters pertaining to the family? And if it gets too delicate, send the children out to play. And when the door opened, it is settled. Our Supreme Court would have met and rendered a decision. We didn't take the matter to the oppressor, not expecting any mercy or understanding from him in the first place. We handled it within the structure of the family. What are we going to tell our children about that period in human history before the first European wore a shoe or lived in a house that had a window, and we produced enduring societies? We did not have a word for jail because no one had ever gone to one. Didn't have a word for orphanage because no one had ever thrown away children. Didn't have a word for nursing home or old people's home because no one ever threw away grandpa and grandma. If we could fashion a society that had that much humanity, what can we do for ourselves today? And how can you explain the contradiction of a people who can build the pyramids and can't maintain a candy store in Harlem?